Class is going smooth. Then someone new shows up one day out of the blue. That's a hitch in your stride. Look for the upside. What's tried and true's still tried and true. I'm Heidi Morris, and I started teaching high school in 1995. Despite nominal retirement in 2015, I've been in the classroom ever since. I'm writing a book about what I've learned in my career because I want to help others experience the connections and joy that I have found in successful teaching. It's called Teaching Matters, and you can sign up for news of it at my website, marksteachingmatters.com. On the very first day of class, when you welcome your students for the first time, and they meet you and you meet them, and you begin to establish classroom expectations, culture, and routines, things are getting off on an even footing for everyone. And as the year goes on, you build on that rhythm of what class is like. People acclimate to it, not only the teacher, but the students as well. They know what's expected, they know the order of things, they know the behavior patterns, and everyone can settle in and enjoy the comfort of the familiar. And then a new student shows up. And for the new student, that day 87 for the rest of you is day 1 for her. And the challenge of helping that new student to find her place, to fit in, to be welcomed, and to mesh with the class while you are simultaneously proceeding with day 87 for everyone else can be a challenge. That was made obvious to me this week when I got a new student out of the blue in 2 of my classes, both geometry and Spanish. So today my goal is to talk about what you do when you get a new student and how you help that new student fit in, buy in, and matter to your class. First thing you need to do is know that they're coming. I got an email announcing this young lady's arrival and made note of it. I adjusted my seating chart in Spanish so that she would have a place to sit, and I made a mental note to ask her for her name in Spanish. It was a Spanish 2 class, so it wasn't a terribly unreasonable expectation. But I blew it in geometry. I'm not the person who drives the seating chart in geometry. And so I was caught flat-footed when the new student showed up, and all I could do is look at her blankly and ask, "Do I know you?" Which is not the best way to make a new person feel welcome. She mumbled her name, and immediately I realized my mistake. "Oh, here, sit here," and just gave her a seat that was currently empty, hoping that that seat's occupant would continue to not show up. And we rolled with class. Spanish was much better. I was able to welcome her by name and point her to her seat and then ask her her name in Spanish. Other things you should do with a new student right away as soon as you've pointed them to their seat, introduce them to the children who sit on either side of them, near them, in front of them, and assign one of those kids to be their go-to buddy for questions that are inevitable during a first day. Everything from when do we turn homework in, to do I have to write in pencil, to why is she mispronouncing grass pants? When they've got a friend there to ask all those little questions to, their comfort level can greatly increase. You want the new student to feel welcome, comfortable, and at ease. And there are a million questions and uncertainties and anxieties on the mind of any person in a new situation. So you welcome them, introduce them to the kids around them, and then roll with class as smoothly as you can. I always introduce the new kid right at the beginning of class. "Class, this is Bob, our new student. Give a hand for Bob." and then move on. Sometimes I've had the new student stand and introduce himself or herself, but that's the exception. Generally, I want the new student to be seen, not terrified, and public speaking is a really good way to immediately terrify most kids. So class roles, you present the lesson, you work through discussions, whatever the content is. Make sure to check in with that new kid at least a couple of times during the course of class. Some classes lend themselves to that more easily than others. It's a cinch in math. Once we got to work time, I kneel next to every student at some point during the period and work with him or her on a problem. So it was no odd thing to kneel next to the new student. She'd see me kneel next to several other kids first. I made sure of that. And ask, show me how you're doing number 3. How are you doing? Do you have any questions? Side note, new students are a terrible source of information for things like, what were you working on in geometry in your last class? You'd think they would have some notion. No, they don't. For example, this new student, when I asked her in Spanish class, what's the last thing you were working on in Spanish? I was expecting an answer like, oh, we were learning reflexive verbs, or we were learning how to give directions around a town. No, what I got was, we were working on translating a song. Oh, and then we were also learning a dance because our teacher always wants us to have fun. Great. That gives me nothing to go on with what this kid does and doesn't know. Generally, the instinct is to put forth the impression, oh yes, I know exactly what you're doing. Oh yes, this is familiar information. Oh yes, these are skills that I have already mastered. The truth is, they don't know much, or they're not sure of what they're doing. But like most of us, they don't want to show any weakness. So don't question them, don't trap them in their blatant lies, but you'll come to understand as you see their work what they do and don't know about what you're doing. So class moves along. You've checked in with that new kid a couple of times. You've answered some questions. When class comes to a close and you've got a few minutes before the bell or a few seconds right after the bell, make it a point to check in with that new student again on a more conversational level. Do they know where their next class is? How is their day going? Did they have anything they wanted to ask you? But especially tell them that you appreciate having them in your class and some particular personal compliment. I appreciate your attentiveness, or I love your creative hairstyle, or you've got beautiful handwriting. Anything as long as it's true and specific to let that kid feel seen and appreciated and a part of your class. When possible, I try to include the nearby student or students as part of this conversation to let that new student be welcome as a member of the group. Throughout class, use that new student's name, specifically many times so that other students remember the name, and of course, so that you, the teacher, remember that name as well. And as the student leaves, tell them you're looking forward to seeing them tomorrow. My own experience as a new student was zero, well, other than that first day of kindergarten and the first day of each of my grades. But I left 4th grade, that was the end of elementary school for me, having had a total of only 3 different teachers in my life. I moved to a new state, and I had 3 teachers during 5th grade. We moved 3 times my 5th grade year, and I was the new kid over and over and over. Each of those experiences for me was terrifying. I developed more and more fear of what would possibly be asked of me, uncertainty of what was expected, whether the new students would be welcoming to me or not. And I've tried to draw on those fears to inform my treatment of new students. Yes, you need to catch them up to speed with the subject matter. Yes, you need to get them incorporated into the rhythm of the class. But first, let them know that they're seen and they're welcomed and you're glad that they're there. You know their name. You're happy to help them and you're willing to work with them no matter what they bring to the table. New students are a dynamic part of the teaching experience that it's really impossible to prepare yourself for because you don't plan on the new kid showing up the day of the test or the third day into the unit or ever. And yet, the kid didn't plan on it either. Do your very best to make that transition into a new class, a new school, possibly a new country, as smooth and as wonderful an experience as you can.